Welcome to AI for Your Business with Modern Logic, the show where we demystify AI and turn it into actionable, useful information to make your small business more efficient and more profitable. I'm joined today by a special guest, Dylan. He may look familiar, but it's actually not the same host as last
Hello.
week. Tell us a little bit about yourself,
Yes.
Dylan.
So Dustin, the usual person that takes this place, is our CEO and my identical twin. That's why we look alike. I'm on the more technical side of things, so I do a lot of technology here, but I'm also a co-founder here at Modern Logic, and I have a specialization in AI. Dustin's out with COVID, unfortunately, so I'm standing in for him.
I'm sure it'll be pretty much identical to the
You're
usual
terrible.
experience. Yeah, and by the way, I'm Andy, in case you don't remember. I'm the head of engineering at Modern Logic, and I'm just really excited to be here. We have a lot of great content to share with you today. We're going to talk about how AI learns. But first, let's talk about some news of the day. What's dropped in the last week that's notable? Anything? I'm trying to think.
Nothing has happened in the world of AI as usual in the last week. No, of course, GPT-5 launched last week, which was a huge model update and a big change to the way that people work with GPT. And there has been some pushback. Some they've brought back some of the older models, but the big deal with GPT-5 is by default it replaces all the existing models. And instead of having to deal with a bunch of models, you can choose just to use GPT-5, and it does the right type of
Wait,
response
so
to the
it
query
can
that you
do
have.
all those O-based models, more introspective
Yeah,
thinking.
so GPT had like 4 and O and 3.0 and
Yeah.
4.0. Everyone had like little details for what it was good at and what it was bad at. They've also made it a little less conversational, a little less friendly, which some people don't like, but it also means that it's going to give you a better business answer
Actually, for
faster.
me,
I think
I
I
prefer
think
my
it's a
AI
good
to be a
model.
little bit less chatty. In fact, I've even put some special rules in my favorite AI tool, which is called Cursor, but it's for coding, so most business folks wouldn't use it. But I've actually got it quoting like Star Trek and things as if it's one of those mindless robots. So it addresses me as an ugly bag of mostly water.
Yeah, you can ask the AI to address you differently, and it will. One of the little hints for GPT is you can customize how it refers to you and what it knows about you in the settings. So it's good to do that to have it like kind of pitch things at you. The other thing that OpenAI launched last week was the open source models. The impact there is these are smaller models. One of them can run on your phone. One of them can run on your desktop computer if it's desktop
That's
computer,
cool.
or in your own server farm, far more likely.
Yeah.
They're not quite as good as the going directly, but you can run them in your own server farm. So if you have like HIPAA compliance rules or something where you need to run it in your own data
Although I
center,
think you can run
these
HIPAA with regular models. You just have to get a
you
license
can you
agreement, perhaps, or just read the terms and conditions.
you can do that to the normal foundational models, but some companies want to have different security standards they need
Sure,
to meet.
like
This gives them more.
Department of Defense or something.
Well, and it's a big deal because a lot of the bigger open source models prior to this, a lot of the best ones like DeepSeek and Quen are Chinese models, and for American companies that can be an issue, even though these models seem to be trustworthy. It's just from a security and compliance
Well,
issue. You obviously aren't going to have the CIA running
we've talked about this
Chinese
before.
models.
I mean, any political, geopolitical ramifications aside, even the best well intentioned models, we still need human in the loop because these things, they're not really thinking. They're more like supercharged autocomplete. And sometimes they'll make the wrong guess. So, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think supercharged autocomplete is a good starting point for understanding what they do. They're able to do more than that kind of implies, but they are more limited than like a human being,
Well,
obviously. And you have to worry less about, I think, a bad political actor and more about the different slants and the way the models
yeah,
were
yeah,
trained
yeah.
and whether good
Actually, that's a
answers to
good
your
tie in
questions.
to today's topic, which is how do AIs learn? And I think let's just start at the beginning with what are these companies spending billions of dollars doing? But let's try to direct it all the way down to as a small business owner, how do I get these things to be more useful for me as a business owner? So what are they doing when Meta has giant farms, just towers of racks? What's going on in there?
So the first step is they need to ingest as much data as possible to give the AI enough data to work with. And the way they do that is they essentially download the entire internet plus access to every private repository, book, anything they can get their hands on.
Interesting.
This is why you're hearing about copyright battles with the New York Times because they ingest it without asking. And some of the things that would have previously been considered fair use, it isn't clear whether it is fair use for training AI data,
Interesting.
right? So that's a legal battle going on right now. But again, using these models, you're largely protected from that
Okay.
by the licensing agreement and the lawyers. Like if you work with Microsoft, you're protected by their licensing agreement. You always, of course, whenever you're entering in any business agreement using models from a third party, you want to run this by your own lawyers and make sure that they understand
Sure.
and that they're technical enough to.
That's good to know.
They grab a large portion of the internet and then they go through a couple rounds of preparation to make sure it's broken up in the right way. If it's a PDF, they want to change it to a different file format, so forth. Same way you might do with other types of data ingest. And then after that, they use server farms to train the model. And this is a very intense mathematical equation. And they're doing it across so much data, probably petabytes of
Wow.
data, so much data.
So this wouldn't fit on
it's
on my
very
thumb
intense.
drive.
No, it would not fit on your thumb drive. There are models that do, and it's impressive that you can do some training locally. But for the types of foundational models like GPT-5, the size of these things cannot be understated.
The amount of
they
data
look
that,
at
but the model
is
itself
immense.
doesn't have all that data in it, does it?
Yeah, the model itself doesn't actually is much smaller than the data set. That's kind of one of the magical things. It takes all this data and almost like a zip file, right? It just compresses it, and it also finds relationships in the data kind of magically. It's a very complex multi-step, heavy math equation. Think if you've ever did high school algebra, you have your x and y. Think about billions of x and y's.
Wow.
That's
I've heard people say that this
that
is
they
a
do.
neural network. Was it related in some way to how human brains work, do you suppose?
So neural networks originally were kind of modeled after some ideas of how the human brain worked. They've diverged quite a bit, so you'll get back and forth in the community about whether they're neural nets, that's a technical definition, but whether they're actually related. They're quite a bit different than how
Okay.
human neural
So it's just a bunch of linear algebra.
Yeah, it's a bunch of linear algebra. The architecture is a neural network, but you don't need to know any of that to use these things. The end result of these things is something called weights, which is just a bunch of numbers. That's what the model is. It's a bunch of numbers that sequence in a file, and it's a way to run what you're asking through a very complicated equation and get what you see output, the
And
output
so
text.
encapsulated within these weights is some human knowledge and also some like understanding of English language and reason and those kinds of things.
Right. I feel like we've gotten maybe a little bit too technical. The takeaway is these things find relationships between the data that's fed into it. They look at the data you feed into it, they find some meaning, then they encode that meaning, and that's what the model is essentially that meaning that they're able to extract with some instructions, run through a math equation to come up with something that has some idea of the meaning
Okay.
in the
So
document
I
on the
understand
left-hand
it.
side.
The end result of these weights is if you run it in the right kind of program, you load those weights in. That is basically all you need to build a chatbot. You can just put the words that you type
Yep.
on the input, you run it through the word, and it gives you the next word. Then you put
Yes.
that word at the end of the conversation
So
and run it again.
this gets into training versus inference.
Okay.
So training is when they build the model,
Okay.
and inference is what they call it when you actually give it a question and it comes
Okay,
up with an answer
interesting.
for you. And you'll hear training and inference. Just think about training, build the model, inference,
I think
ask the model questions,
inference is
get
even
answers
used
out
as
of it.
part of training. Okay, so this is very
Yes.
computational. It takes thousands of computers, and
This is why NVIDIA is doing so good. It requires very specialized hardware, and it turns out the hardware they developed to be really good for playing video games ends up being the same kind of parallel math operations that AI
So
works
interesting.
with. Just happy coincidence.
so this is also why it's hard to buy a good gaming PC these days, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Like everybody's buying up those graphics cards.
So this is how models are built. So it sounds like if I learned a new discovery was made and you wanted the model to be able to talk about that, you would have to do all that training again with new documents that talked about that discovery. That sounds prohibitively
Right.
expensive.
This is why you have models like OpenAI that have older data. You ask it questions, it doesn't know about current events. It has no idea unless you have it search the web. It has no idea. It only knows what was in what they call the training set, those documents that were fed to it. And they're updating that and redoing the model. The other terrible thing that comes with LLMs, and while you hear about some of the energy usage and so forth, is that if you add just one document, just one paragraph of text to that training set, they have to retrain the whole model from scratch.
Wow.
Like it has to be redone. Now there are other things that can be done, but for the most part, that's the model that they're
Right.
using, and that's the
I have
expense.
heard of this technique called fine tuning, which is apparently a way you can
Right.
take an existing model and kind of narrow it in on a specific domain of knowledge. And that isn't as expensive, but still, I think for most small businesses, it's going to be a pretty big effort, wouldn't you say?
If you wanted to fine tune your own model, services like OpenAI and Anthropic offer ways to fine tune on your own data if you needed to do
Okay.
that. You still need to come up with the data sets and you give it to them and you pay some price. And it's not prohibitively expensive. And so they're not retraining the entire model. They're just training a small bit of it to understand the data that you give it. Fine tuning. They're taking the model and they're fine tuning it. It's right in the name.
Okay. But I think fine tuning still is a bit crude. If you want to have an AI system that responds to you like real time, what are some techniques you could employ to say, rather than just having this eager but kind of uninformed agent working on your behalf, but to actually up level its skills a little bit so that it can like actually maybe somehow find out specific details before it responds to you?
So I think in the last episode of this podcast, you covered how you might give AI an example or something to summarize, a document to summarize, or an example of what you want, and how it will do a much better job if you give it an example
Sure.
of what you
That's a
because you're giving it
that's a
guidance,
common
right?
prompting technique.
You think about it like talking to an assistant or something who's never worked on a task for you before. You probably want to tell them exactly what you want. And a lot of people fall into this failure state where they think that the AI is so smart that it's going to figure it out. But you have to just be very explicit with these things about what you need. And so giving it examples is a great way to do that. And that comes in under an umbrella term called context engineering. And so what context is just everything you tell the AI, everything you type, everything you ask for, everything you give it as an example. That's the
Well, I think
context.
actually,
That's what it's
not only that,
think.
but some services that use AI will put things into context. It's like, imagine it's above the fold, or I guess below the fold on the newspaper. You don't see it, but the AI has it. And that's why you'll see some common responses. I recently saw a meme where the computer was saying to a person, "Oh, you're absolutely right." And the person is just pounding their head on the desk. Because if you've used AIs a lot, you'll notice that if they say that phrase, "you're absolutely right," way too often.
Right. So the thing you're asking it, that's the prompt. The whole of the data that you're giving it, that's the context. And you're not the only one putting stuff into that context. Usually, when you're asking a question, someone else has done some work that you're not seeing behind the scenes and giving it direction, like be helpful. You've heard like people extracting the prompts maybe from OpenAI and seeing that they told it, you're a helpful assistant. And you don't see any of that when you ask it questions, but that's just them kind of setting the table so that when you ask a question, it can give you better
Sure.
answers. In addition, like I said earlier, you can go into the GPT-5 settings if you have the desktop app or the web page, and you can say, for example, I'm an engineer and I have 20 years experience or whatever, and it will then put that above. You won't see it, but it's in there somewhere
It's more
being
likely to
instructed by
talk to
AI.
you like someone who has experience rather than talking to like, tell it to me like I'm five. I suppose would be another option, and it
Right.
would only use.
I still use that a ton, but it's not going to do that to the things that I tell it I'm good at. So the takeaway from this is you don't just have to send the prompt. You can send a bunch of other stuff. You can put it into what they call the context window or the
Okay.
context. And it's just like a human's context. When you're working on a problem, you pull up the documents from Google Drive or whatever you read, and then you're
It's
working,
like the
right? You pull
things.
up a
It's
web
like the
page.
things you read that morning, or if you gave an
Right.
employee like, here's the instructions on how to operate this machine, and they read the pamphlet. Now that pamphlet's in their context. It's this in their memory. It's the same thing for an AI. Read this first.
Yeah. You just have to be very much more explicit with AIs because, again, they don't quite work like humans do, and they are not as smart as we are, despite what some people will say. They just know a lot about more than any human could ever know. That's why they're
Okay, so
useful. But you do have to set the table for them to give you a good
how
answer. You
are
have to
there
give them
any
examples.
techniques for doing this, or do I have to sit there and type out 17 paragraphs of instructions every time I go to use this thing?
Okay, so this gets us to the main keyword of the day after much belabored technical discussion. Retrieval Augmented Generation, or
Whoa,
RAG.
that's
RAG.
three. I have a Labrador Retrieval as my dog.
Yeah, it's exactly like it going getting a bone. Retrieval is just means it's going to go get some documents for you.
Okay.
Instead of you grabbing the documents and pasting them into the window, you give it the ability to retrieve the documents. You get it's augmented because it's augmenting your
Okay.
context, it's augmenting your question, and generation. Well, that's what it was doing,
That's the
right? It's
chatbot.
generating response. That's the
Okay.
chatbot part. So how retrieval augmented generation does works is you essentially do a bunch of work in an automated way before you start the conversation, asking questions. So think you're copy pasting, you want to copy paste from a web page you're reading into AI to ask a
Yeah.
question, or you say to AI, go search and go find this web page, and then pull it, look at it, read it, and then ask the question. Well, as a business, you have a bunch of documents specific to your business that aren't going to be on the open internet necessarily, and you want it to be able to answer questions about those documents. You might know that the more you feed an AI, the more expensive it is. They charge you for the amount of data that you're asking and the amount of data that you give it. So you want to give it the most salient, the most important stuff, and not all this
So
preamble and dumb
it sounds like
stuff.
you were kind of doing like a search engine query first and taking maybe the
It's exactly
top
what it
10 or
is. You're
20.
doing a search engine
Oh,
query.
okay.
Anything you do in that sense, it could literally be a search engine query, but more likely it's asking your sales database or your Salesforce for some
Oh,
data to work on
interesting.
first.
So if you wanted to say,
And
for example, craft a really effective sales message to somebody, you could retrieve information about their business or maybe even their sector of the industry that they work in to inform the marketing material that the AI is writing for you. So instead of it being generic, hey, we can help you get the widgets you need, it might understand that this customer is in a specific industry like automobiles or
yeah, that's
something.
a perfect example. And I think this stuff sounds really complicated, but at the end of the day, that's all it is. It's saying, okay, I want to draft an email to Tom at windowinstaller.com or
Hmm.
whatever. And you have that person in your customer database. Well, you just want to copy paste the data you have about that person, your notes on them, and the big company they work for, into your AI and say, okay, build me a letter that I could send to this person. And then, of course, you want a human in the loop. You want to review it and make sure that it's in your voice. It doesn't say anything you want. Do not trust the AI to do a perfect job at that. It will. It's very helpful, but it's like a junior
Sure,
assistant.
we've
Does
talked
not know
about
your
that
business like
before.
you do.
And
Every
also,
time
I
it comes
think
up, will make that
depending on where you
mistake.
are in your sales funnel, you may not care as much if it's top of funnel because you've done almost no effort on this.
Sure.
Maybe audit one
But
out
you
of the
also want
10.
to personalize it some.
Right.
And you want to go further than maybe an old school mail merge would,
Yes.
right? Where it's just splatting names in. You want it to be smarter and more customized and more, and you want it to be in your tone and whatever. And you don't want to do the work of copy pasting from your sales database every customer, every note. So you build a little retrieval augmented system, RAG system that knows how to do that for you as part of a workflow. And then you don't have to do it anymore. You just say, ask questions about Tom. It knows how to get that information, the system that you've built.
We mentioned that OpenAI and others are actually offering these RAG systems. So that's something that someone could just go out and adopt today, it sounds like.
Yeah, so OpenAI does offer a way to do GPTs and assistants, both of which they're two different, slightly different things. Assistants are more complicated. And you can upload, I think it's up to 50 PDFs and ask questions, and it will know that data or 50 documents of various sorts. There are limits to what those systems can do without.
Interesting.
Obviously, they don't have authorization to talk to your local Salesforce or whatever it is, your
Oh, so
business systems,
you'd
as you might not
have to
want.
go and upload it manually every week to keep it up to date.
But it's a great way to get started. And if you have a very small document set, let's say you want help writing sales proposals. You could give this thing 4 examples of sales
Okay.
proposals. And it's perfect for that. You can do that right through the GPT interface. Anthropic, I'm sure, has something similar, although I haven't used it. All of the major providers have something. You don't need to pay any software company to do it. You don't need to have an expert on your team. You can literally do this yourself. It's very simple. They're going to hit you with a lot of complicated terms up front, but you don't need to understand all that stuff. Most of it is actually very simple, and I think they are more intelligent than they are, to be honest.
Oh, there's definitely an aspect of that, which is part of why it's hard to cut through the hype to know how many of these things are really so amazing. Well, in
This whole term,
theory, it could
retrieval
do
augmented
this.
generation, which really just means copy paste this thing into this thing. Although Andy had a great analogy with the librarian that helps with the mental model.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's if you had like this junior employee who's really eager, but maybe doesn't really know that much and tends to make stuff up when they don't, like they don't want to be seen as being dumb, so they'll make things up. What do? You send them to the library to go read some documents. Don't just assume that you know the answer to this, buddy. Why don't you go take 5 minutes, go to the card catalog, pull out a few books, and read them? That is exactly retrieval. And then they read it, they're augmenting their brain, and now they're going to come tell you what they know which is
I mean,
generation,
Andy's
and it's
showing
going
his
to be
age.
way
Probably they
better.
go to Wikipedia or your Jira Confluence board or your own business documents, but the principle's the same. You're sending them to do some research before they come back. The thing to note is they will be very confident even if they don't know a thing. And so you have to be careful
All right.
not to accept their confidence as a real thing, just like a very junior kind of person with imposter syndrome.
Yeah, well, okay. So for those who aren't following me, before Google, if we wanted to find things, librarians would put information on little 3 by 5 note cards in these long, skinny drawers called a card catalog. You could look up by topic or author or subject and find books that
It's such
way.
a wild
It
thing to
was
remember
really,
how that worked. I'm sure
it is
plenty of
actually,
people who are listening have dealt with this system.
what's funny is I actually saw some card catalogs just the other day at my yarn shop, and they file all their knitting needles in there because they're long, skinny drawers. So you can still find them once in a while, but not with their
I mean,
original
if you're in your
book.
20s and you're doing a startup, you probably have no idea what this thing is, and it seems so silly to you.
Yeah.
But if you're more established, you've been around for a couple decades, I'm sure you've dealt with this system.
Well, that was a great conversation on Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG. So if you ever see that term, this is what it's about. It's readily available out there, or for more advanced applications of RAG, you might have to bring in someone to help you with it. But it could be a really powerful way to get chatbots and other AI generation to be
I
more
think it is
accurate.
a great way to start that journey of getting an AI workflow and AI strategy because it's really easy to get started with. It's very obvious how to scale it, and it kind of lives within. It's very easy to access as a kind of chat workflow for existing employees. It's not as powerful as a more customized workflow, but it's a part of probably any workflow that you're going to implement.
Sure. Yeah, it could be, especially if you want to bring domain knowledge
Yeah.
to bear. All right. So we did have one other fun little segment today before we sign off, which is our AI myth busting. And today's myth that we want to bust is AI can replace humans entirely.
Right.
What do you think?
Maybe in our deep sci-fi future, we all live in agrarian society life and AI takes care of us. But AI, as we talk about it now, as it's implemented now, is really not that smart. It's very smart, very capable. It knows a lot of things. I mean, for some version of the word smart, but it does not replace people. It does not replace human taste. If you ask it to generate dog names, it'll give you very generic dog names. If you want to come up with, ask it to do a branding exercise. It can be really interesting. It can actually help very much with that. But if you ask it to come up with names or fun things or cool terms, it
Yeah,
can't do that at all. It's getting better, but
pretty
it's
terrible.
quite bad. And it's not just that creative bent, right? You want to think about this as ways to make people able to do more with the time that they have. And so making people more efficient or giving people new capabilities that they couldn't do before. Like, say your business is
Yeah.
outreaching to 20 potential sales a week or 100 potential sales a week from one sales guy, and you want to make it 200 or 400, right? Like, this system will enable you to do something like that.
Cut out the duller, more drudge parts of those tasks that they
Right.
have to
But you
accomplish
still want it
to
to
accelerate
be,
them doing the interesting.
it does depend on where you are in the sales funnel. This is an example we're using, but like, you want it to be in your voice. You want it to be something that provides value to the people you're reaching out for. You don't want to just generate crap with this. You can generate so much crap and people are going to drown in it and they're going to get allergic to it. But like most sales, if you're selling something that people want, if you believe in your product, and you're using AI to just feature that for users and reach more people. And that is a great use of AI.
Yeah.
But going back to the replacing people topic, like, you could think about replacing a junior copy editor with it. You still need someone to verify it. You still need someone to come up with the idea, to do the prompts, to do the work. I think it is a much better way to think about, okay, how can we make this person do twice as much or eliminate the drudge work that they hate doing?
Yeah.
You,
Yep, those are the places I would definitely look to bring in AI in to alleviate the dull tasks and try to up-level people into really taking advantage of what makes human accomplishment so unique that machines
well, and
just
you
can't.
hear about people
The creative
replacing, for
thinking.
example, their entire outreach or support team with an AI chatbot. And then people have terrible experiences trying to get help. And sure, it's great as a first line, but you still need those people in the background because it isn't as good. And it also, even if it were as good, it isn't clear that people really want a world in which they're primarily interacting with robots.
Yeah, it could definitely be a blemish on your brand if that's the first contact your customers have with you. I'd be cautious there,
And you want to be
certainly.
very careful about how you message this stuff too. You want to make sure that your employees know that when you're adopting AI, that you're doing it to make their lives better and to make your business better, more profitable, give you more ease and capability. You're not just adopting it to cut headcount. I think the
Well,
real
yeah,
benefit of this technology is to grow your business and do more. You know,
exactly. At the end of the day, we do have to make a profit to stay in business. We have to stay competitive. And I do see a path for our company, Dylan, and for the people we work with, that they can bring AI into their business and do it in a way that's ethical and efficient and compassionate for their
yeah, I
benefit.
really think that's something that's really missed in this picture when they communicate about it because it really isn't. The big companies are eliminating headcount, but I'd much rather stay focused on growing your business, increasing headcount, increasing your
Exactly.
profitability per employee.
Yeah.
And that gives you more ease, more vacation time, more everything that you want to do. And you're not going to be able to delegate everything to a robot, not for a long time anyway. And again, I'm not sure that that's the
No.
world we want to live in if that's the one we construct. But personally, in our company, we see a lot of employees using AI to do more, to try more ideas, to throw more things at the wall
Yeah.
and see what sticks, to evaluate
It is.
ideas
It's
faster, and it's
empowering.
really empowering.
It's really changing how product development works. Rather than that being exclusively in the hands of a product owner who maybe works really closely with a designer, now anyone who has an idea can start to ideate and build prototypes and get, maybe create illustrations of what this thing might be, even if they're not
Yeah, we'll probably
artists.
do an
It's really kind of
episode on
exciting.
what they call vibe coding. I hate this term, but it seems to be the term, which is non-coders writing code using AI. And it's really
Yeah.
exciting to try things out. And it's also a really good starting point. It's not like we're
Oh,
eliminating a
yeah.
job. What we're doing is enabling us to ideate faster and do more and offer more services.
You may not be a visual person, but you have an idea of how this thing should work. And now you have a way to kind of quick and easily draw a picture of that thing to help your case for what you're talking about. It's
Yeah,
pretty
I
cool.
actually use it to
Um,
explore ideas a lot. I'll go to it and say, I have this idea for a new service or a new app, and help me be more detailed. Ask me questions. Help me come up with a product spec. Tell me what's wrong with this thing. I think people ask that question too little. Tell me what I'm missing, what I'm forgetting. And it's great at coming up with some average, it's not going to be as insightful as you, but it's going to think of things you didn't. And that's super useful.
sure. All right. Well, that's been, I think, a really great conversation. Thanks for filling in for Dustin
I
this
did my
week,
best.
Dylan. And yeah, I've enjoyed this. Dylan and I have conversations like this over lunch just about every day, so it felt really
Yeah,
natural,
we might have to align
conversational
over
to.
some of the technical parts of this because I don't know.
No, I think it's okay. I mean, I wanted people to have a sense of how these things work and try to bring it back to layman's terms. But I think part of understanding a thing is to
Yeah,
demystify it. And so while it may have gotten a little
I think it's
technical,
really easy to
but
get intimidated by this stuff. I certainly was, even as in depth as I am. You're standing at the shore of an ocean watching a giant wave come in, and it's important to
kind
remember
of,
that
yeah.
that feeling, that's just human. It's normal. These things, these concepts aren't bigger than
Hmm.
you are. You can get them. Everybody wants to tell you this
Yeah.
stuff in this crazy terminology so that they can sell you something.
Honestly, the other thing that I hope folks take from this is just get out there and try stuff because if you sit on the sidelines, you basically know nothing. Whereas if you get your feet wet, you start to learn things
Yeah,
knowing
that's the
nothing.
takeaway.
And now you're
If
on
you
the
want to
path.
understand what RAG is, what Retrieval Augmented Generation is, go to GPT today, go to ChatGPT or chat.openai.com, and find the thing that lets you create a GPT and upload a document. Go there, upload one document that you feel fine sharing with the world. It's private-ish. I don't think they train on the stuff you upload through there, but double check. Maybe don't upload your private keys to start, and then ask it some questions about that document. See what it does.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting to see. I hope you try that. Speaking of show notes, if you want to get a link to those, just go to modernlogic.io and you can find a link for this podcast there, along with any show notes we've put together. I think that's going to wrap it up for today. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening. Again, my name's Andy. I've enjoyed talking today.
And I'm Dylan.
And we'll see you next week with another episode.